I'm very excited to be here. It's my pleasure and honor to moderate this special roundtable discussion with leading European and Israeli experts on the future of the Abraham Accords and Europe's strategic role and interest in strengthening regional peace and security in the Middle East. I'm especially excited to be joining you from the city of Marrakesh in Morocco, where I witness every day the eagerness of Moroccans to build more ties with Israel. I visited this morning the Mohammed VI University, which is about an hour drive north of Marrakesh. It is a world-class university that has signed cooperation agreements with Israeli universities. It is opening next week its Faculty of Medicine, and its curriculum has been designed in close cooperation with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. As I was shown around the huge and beautiful campus this morning, I was told by my guide that the university even opened a synagogue for its Jewish students. And I visited it, and I must say that I was as surprised as I was moved. Here was I on a university campus in an Arab country, and there was a beautifully furnished synagogue with a Sefer Torah. So I witnessed directly how the normalization agreements between Israel and 4 Arab countries are making profound and welcome changes. And we're here today to better understand how those changes can benefit Europe as well, and how Europe can contribute to those changes. Now, to discuss this, we're honored to have on our panel Amos Yaldin and Kirstin Müller. Amos chairs FELNET's Forum for Strategic Dialogue. He has served for over a decade as director of the Institute for National Security Studies, or INSS, which is Israel's leading think tank. Previously, he served as a member of the IDF's General Staff and Deputy Commander of its Air Force. During his service in the Air Force, Amos crossed multiple enemy lines, and he participated as a combat pilot in the Yom Kippur War, in addition to taking part in attacks on nuclear reactors in Iraq. Formerly an IDF attaché to the United States, Amos has also served as head of the Defense Intelligence Directorate between 2006 and 2010. Kirstin Müller is a member of FELNET Germany's advisory board. She's a member of the National Regulatory Control Council and a senior associate fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations, or Deutsche Gesellschaft für Auswärtige Politik. Previously, Kirstin was a member of the Bundestag from 1994 to 2013, as well as chairwoman of the parliamentary group of the Green Party from 1994 to 2002. She also served as Minister of State in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs between 2002 and 2005. And from 2013 to 2018, she headed the Israel Bureau of the Heinrich Böll Foundation in Tel Aviv. So we're very glad to have you both. I will start maybe with a question for Amos, and then I'll go to Kirstin. So Amos, great to have you with us. My first question to you is the following. With a 2-year perspective, how would you summarize the changes that the Abraham Accords have brought to Israel's foreign and security policy?
Yes, when we try to see what we have achieved, and is it a distinguished achievement or modest achievement, it very much depends on expectations. And the expectations were not that high, because we have the experience with peace agreements with Jordan, with Egypt, that was a very cold peace with a lot of connection to the Israeli-Palestinian issue, which dragged them back anytime we had conflict with the Palestinians. And what we see in the Abrahamic Accord is totally different. I think it's a big political success. Are they becoming Zionists? No. But the overlapping and the common interests and the trust that was built politically, these accords are a huge success. 10 out of 10. Peace, again, become an important positive value in the conversation and an objective that you want to achieve. Because for 25 years, especially after Oslo, the Israelis moved from peace to security. And now they have a wonderful proof to go back to peace as the goal of their political objectives and national security concept. The relations were not withdrawn, as we have two rounds of fire in Gaza. In the past, Egyptian ambassador was called back and the relations were frozen. On the contrary, here the UAE and Bahrain make it very clear that they will not let the Palestinians, especially Hamas, spoil the relations. Ambassadors were staying in Tel Aviv, and we saw visits of President Herzog and President and Prime Minister Lapid, and basically the relations are on the surface are very good. If there are some disappointment, they are under the surface, which is totally different. It's the opposite from the case with Egypt. We never thought that the UAE or Bahrain will be a springboard to our activity in Iran. We know that these countries are very sensitive to the Iranian threat, and we never asked them. But on security, we were very helpful, especially after the Houthis attacking Abu Dhabi. And unlike the Americans that were very slow to come to the help of the Emirates, Israel have done it very quickly, and it is very much appreciated, in contrary to their disappointment from the US. People to people. This is also a new dimension which not exist in Egypt, a little bit in Jordan, but also problematic. And people to people, once again, 9 out of 10. In spite of Corona, Israelis flooded Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and it seems like they were welcome. They were in the street, talking to people, and also have the feeling that this peace, unlike the peace with and Egypt, has a lot of dividends. Economy, it's huge potential, but the potential was not materialized according to expectation. It is going slowly. Expectations were very high. It's different cultures, and we need to learn and to study each other culture and norms. But we see a lot of cooperation, joint ventures, project, but not in the scope that people hoped. Even though just checking the last data, and we see the last quarter much better than before. Last but not least, which is so important, is trust. And I think on this case, Mohammed bin Zayed and other top officials in the UAE have developed trust with the Israeli leadership that have changed. We had 3 prime ministers since we had the Abrahamic Accord, but the last 2, Bennett and Lapid, were able to really create a trust in the relation, which help a lot in assisting them with the defense needs of the UAE and Bahrain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. My next question, sorry, is to Kerstin, and my question is the following. I would think that originally many in Europe were skeptical and even dismissive of the Abraham Accords, and yet there's been a change of tone recently among decision and opinion makers who've come to realize the value of these accords and what they can contribute to European interests. So my question is, how do you explain that change, first of all, and do you expect it to continue?
Well, thank you, Emmanuel and Amos, and to Annette that I can join again this very nice discussion round. We just heard from Amos Jadlin that the Abraham Accords have developed an enormous dynamic in the Middle East. And I think these dynamics have met so far even more than the expectations of the partners. Like Israel benefits from more acceptance and in the consequence, more integration in the region. We just heard about it. The Arab partners profit from a greater exchange in the fields of security, economic, science, and culture. And the new Biden administration, which is important for Europe and Europe's position, I think, is not only continuing the process which was initiated by the former Trump administration, but has fully embraced it. Blinken called it at this press conference after the Negev summit in March, a new chapter in the Middle East, and that the US will strongly support this transformation process. So although these new dynamics in the Middle East are more intense than many expected, I think the European position towards the Abraham Accords is still quite reluctant. I mean, they realize now there is a dynamic. Wow, don't we have to, change our attitude, our politics? But as far as I know, it didn't happen yet. There are some press releases of the EU where, of course, they welcome the Abraham Accords, but there isn't any special program, for example, which supports the Abraham Accords directly. There are recently published European Council conclusions on forming a strategic partnership with the Gulf states. And this could mean some progress in the political directions of the Abraham Accords because they are mentioning at least the normalization agreements. And they underlining the need to strengthen the political dialogue, enhance institutional and regional cooperation, and to foster people-to-people contacts. To my view, all possible areas where the EU could easily step in as a partner, maybe even, and a supporter of the Abraham Accords. But the Council conclusions, that they just conclusions so far, is they do not use the fact that the agreements already exist and that they have developed these amazing dynamics. The question is, what are the reasons for this reluctance? And I think it's obvious that the EU is still in German you say Zaungast. I think in English it's onlooker or bystander of the whole process. Because one reason is they are afraid that the Palestinian issue or that the perspective of a two-state solution, that this will become much more difficult with this normalization process and this new dynamic. It means not less than a paradigm shift in the Middle East policies of the European Middle East policy, because So far, since the Arab Initiative in 2002, the parameters of international efforts have been the recognition of Israel's right to exist and the normalization of relations with the Arab states, only in exchange with the establishment of a Palestinian state. And I mean, I think this is one reason why the peace agreements with Egypt and with Jordan have remained kind of a cold peace, where here you can see a warm peace, if we can say so. But the Abraham Accords, the normalization of the relations is going on without the establishment of a Palestinian state and without the withdrawal of Israel from the occupied territory, which is understandable. But I think this is one main reason why the EU was, as the Palestinians, so surprised by the whole process and by the dynamics, because they lost an important, if I can say so, bargaining chip vis-a-vis Israel, vis-a-vis the process. And now they have to rethink their policy. They have to restart a process. You know, how can we formulate our Middle East policy new? And how can we probably step in and becoming even a partner or support this dynamics, which to my view could have positive influence and effects, probably also on the Palestinian conflict, but this is not the question here. As Amos said, the normalization process is going on and is starting, and I'm sure some other countries, other Arab states will follow. Although the Palestinian conflict, the so-called conflict, it hasn't been resolved. So this is, I think, this is one main reason, and the other is, if I'm allowed to mention this, behind closed doors, you could hear that the signing of the agreements under the Trump administration were driven by short-term security interests of the signatory states, like that they got some important carrots in exchange, the UAE, the F-35 fighters, the Sudan, the removal from the list of states sponsoring terrorism, and Morocco, the recognition of the US of its sovereignty over West Sahara. And some of these points, like, for example, the recognition of the sovereignty over West Sahara, is, as we know, problematic for the EU, because the EU position is different. You know, they're supporting the UN process. So for them, these are problems. But if we look what happened during the last 2 years, to my view, the EU succumbed to a dramatic misjudgment that the agreements would not develop any relevant momentum beyond that. And this assessment was obviously wrong, as we know today, because I think the agreements have the potential to develop the relations into a real strategic partnership between Israel and the Sunni neighbors in the region, whereas the EU at the same time has still not yet developed a strategy towards the new dynamics and therefore remain in this bystander position to the process. This is my analysis so far.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. I must say that on the issue of Western Sahara, from my talks with Moroccans here, government officials, business leaders, academics, it's a very sensitive issue. And the Moroccans are furious at France, for example, for not even making any concession on recognizing, at least partially, Morocco's claims on that territory. And that's one of the reasons why the Moroccans, as I will be mentioning later in one of my questions, are interested in upgrading their relation with Israel, because Israel has no problem recognizing Morocco's claims on Western Sahara. But this is a very, very sensitive issue here in Morocco, and thank you for mentioning it. My next question is to both of you, to both Amos and Kirsten. It's the following. Do you think that the Abraham Accords were just a way to officialize military and intelligence ties that already existed, in fact, between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, and also Morocco? Or do you see them as a game changer meant to face together both the Iranian threat but also what is called the energy transition, the fact that oil is no longer the geopolitical weapon that it was in the past, and that the UAE and the Gulf states in general realize that. So do you see this just as, I mean, Kirsten mentioned before the price that the US paid for some of those countries to officialize their relations with Israel, but don't you think that there's more to that, as I said, a game changer in facing Iran together and in handling the energy transition? We'll start with you, Amos.
Yeah, I think since the Abrahamic Accord was signed, we saw two dramatic developments in the international arena. That after looking at them, you see that they have made the Abrahamic Accord even stronger. One is the withdrawal of the US from Afghanistan. We already forgot it, but it was a shock to the allies of America. They saw how America decided to leave without early warning to the regional partners. And it's in a way encourage, or let's say have made the position that America cannot be trusted as a superpower that will support the Arabs. They look for another superpower, original superpower, which in a way, China, Russia, and Israel. I don't think that they can rely on China and Russia. And America is very upset if they see Chinese bases or Chinese weapon coming to the UAE or Bahrain. But this is something we have to pay attention to. America credibility went down dramatically. And the add-on of it was when Abu Dhabi was attacked from Yemen by the Houthis, and the Americans, I already spoke about it, were very slow. I saw the frustration in the UAE. A very, very senior leader told me, we were with the Americans in all their wars. Wars against our Muslim brothers. Not brotherhood, but brother. We went with them to Afghanistan, we went with them to Iraq, to Syria, against Daesh, in Libya, everywhere. And when it's come to the American to help us, they were not there. So this is a big change since the signing, and looking at Israel as not a full substitution to a superpower, but some substitution is strengthening the Abrahamic Accord. Then the war in Ukraine. President Biden called the leaders in the Gulf, asked them to pump more oil, and they haven't picked the phone, which is once again the consequences. It's because of what happened in Afghanistan and in the attacks on Abu Dhabi. I think it's what we see today when the price of oil again is very high. It's give a lot of resources to the Gulf state, and it's enabled them to move forward with resources that were not there when the price of oil were low. Those who lived in the 70s and saw the Arab oil weapon directed at Israel is seeing today that the Arab oil weapon is directed against Iran. This is what MBZ and MBS are told Biden. You are going to give Iran a lot, billions of dollars, tens of billions, hundreds of billions, and you want us to pump more oil? This makes no sense. So it's a different Middle East when the price of when the oil weapon is not directed to Israel, which from another aspect, because of the natural gas in the Middle East, become quite independent on energy.
Thank you, Amos. Kerstin, please.
Well, there were, as far as I understood, two driving factors behind the normalization agreements. One was, Amos analyzed it already, one was Iran, a common threat analyst towards Iran. And if you see at the summits, not only the Negev, but before, and the visits which were taking place in Bahrain, in UAE, very often they released press releases on the topic of Iran, and they are worried together about the GCPOA and that the EU and the US, are mistaken on that and so forth. So that was one factor. And the other is, as far as I understood, but maybe there are others in the audience who can add to this, is the fear that the US will withdraw from the region in the long run, like the pivot has changed, has switched. I mean, something, of course, parameters have changed due to the war in Ukraine and Russia, but I think in general, this is still true. And both factors pushed them towards the normalization agreements. So security, of course, will be one area where they will cooperate in the future, as far as I understood, and they signed some agreements and so forth. To my view, I mean, I'm from the Green Party, and the whole subject of energy transition, also due to climate change, I think this is also one very important area of current, but also of future cooperation, where the normalization agreements have a big chance, but where also Europe could step in. I think the attraction of the normalization agreement lies in the outlook of greater integration economically, security-wise, but also with the prospect of increased people-to-people contact. I would add this. And I suggested that the EU, but also maybe the German government, could in this context initiate project-based trilateral cooperation or quadrilateral cooperation between Israel, the UAE, or Bahrain, and Europe, and maybe even in the future, the Palestinians, in order to let the Palestinians participate at least to the economic dynamics. But I think this is one very interesting area. One example, the gas deal of the EU, Israel, and Egypt. I mean, Egypt is not part of the normalization agreements of the Abraham Accords, but they participated to the summit, and they kind of supporting the whole process. So this is an example which could be expanded. But also in other areas like renewable energies, for example, they could start a new cooperation where also Europe, could profit off, but also could, initiate some programs which could be maybe interesting for the partners. So I think this is a very big area of cooperation for the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. My next question is to you, Amos. As I've said, I'm in Morocco right now, and there is a topic that my Moroccan counterparts keep bringing up. They are furious at France for refusing to even acquiesce to Morocco's claims over Western Sahara. And they're also mad at Emmanuel Macron for visiting Algeria a couple of weeks ago. And the Moroccans keep telling me, we're done with France and we want Israel to become our main military partner, especially since the Iranians and the Algerians support the Polisario Front. So my question to you is, do you really think that Israel and Morocco can become close military partners or even allies. You have to unmute yourself, Amos.
Yeah, let's put it in the right context. If somebody thinks that there will be a Middle East or North Africa, Middle East, NATO, this is a mistake. This cannot go that far, and we don't need to go that far. Israel don't want to go and fight with Morocco in Western Sahara or with the UAE in Yemen, and we don't want the Moroccans or the UAE come and fight with us against Hezbollah. What we can do and we must do is a Middle East air defense alliance, because this is much more legitimate and urgent. And what we saw in the last 2 years, that Iran become better and better in launching ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, UAV, and on the Gulf, and I will come to Morocco in a minute, on the Gulf, we need to cooperate, and we are cooperating, but it must also institutionalize on sharing intelligence, on sharing air picture and early warning about attack, and then selling to our new friends, the best of Israel missile defense, and sometimes intercept these cruise missiles with airplanes. Israel has a lot of operational knowledge, and the fact that Iran tried to attack Israel in the last 6 years unsuccessfully, and the fact that they attack Saudi Arabia all the time, until the ceasefire in Yemen, it was every week, give us a wonderful, legitimate opportunity to cooperate. So this is in the Gulf against Iranian proxies, and sometimes, as in September 2019, it came directly from Iran, not from Yemen. With Morocco, we can help the Moroccans in their war or defense needs, mostly by the defense industry of Israel and defense doctrines that will be adapted to the need of the Moroccans. And I think, once again, if I look into the future of the Abrahamic Accord, this is an area that we can really move forward. Besides that, I want very much to emphasize that the economic potential is there, joint ventures, trading, and especially technology, because Israel is a high-tech superpower, and we can help these countries like Morocco and the UAE and Bahrain. It's not easy. You need to change the culture of how you do business, how you give very young people the authority to move forward, to make mistakes, to fail and to do it again. This is an Israeli culture that we cannot copy-paste it directly to the countries that we are speaking about, but we can take elements of it and make sure that these countries are joining the cyber realm and the high-tech industry in a way. Last but not least, when I look into the future, I want to see Abrahamic Accord 2.0. I want to see the Saudis joining. I want to see the Indonesian joining, two very important countries. Indonesia is far away. but the Saudis are in the core of the Middle East with the same concerns from Iran, maybe even more than the Gulf. However, it is going slowly. It's going slowly because there is ceasefire in Yemen, so they are not urgent. It's going slowly because the king belonged to the old guard, and the Arab Peace Initiative was mentioned. The king is insisting on it, and Israel cannot accept it because it's not only Palestinian state. It's dictate all the parameters of the agreement, which Israel cannot stand up to. As Christine said, most of the agreements were trilaterals. Israel, the Arabs, and the Americans. So what the Americans can give the Saudis to make them happy. President Biden came to Saudi Arabia. He haven't shake hand with MBS, but with
an iron fist.
Yeah, exactly. So this is another barrier to go forward, and there is barrier in Jerusalem, because even if you don't accept the Arab Peace Initiative, their expectation is that Israel will say something like, Arab Peace Initiative is a base for negotiation. We are not accepting it as a dictate, but as a base for negotiation, or a Bar Ilan speech, very much like Netanyahu gave in 2009. Bennett refused to do it. Lapid cannot do it because of the election. Maybe after the election, we can go forward. The Saudis are very sensitive to leaks, very sensitive. And anytime there is leaks about the under the table visits and cooperation, they are stopping the process. So I don't see it happening in the next year, but I think this is the big challenge for all of us, to bring the Saudis on board, and this is a real important country in the Middle East, that if they join the Abrahamic Accord, this is a game changer.
Thank you.
If I may add, I agree with Amos concerning the important role of the Saudi Arabia. I mean, they silently kind of accepted the whole process, because otherwise Bahrain wouldn't have been on board. And I think, but I think it's not going to happen too fast. Why? I mean, as long as one thing, again, as a European, maybe I must say so, but I'm convinced that it is one important political point, is still the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I mean, the Arab Peace Initiative, at least the current king, not the son, not the crown prince, but the current king is still referring to the Arab Peace Initiative, and said that, and put this topic, the Palestinian conflict, on the agenda. And also the US, Blinken, and at the press conference, and also Biden, they emphasized 2 points. One is the Palestinian conflict, the unresolved Palestinian conflicts, and how are there any ideas, and there should come ideas on the table to kind of maybe integrate them in the process. And the other is, of course, the situation in Saudi Arabia. The murdering of Khashoggi is something a democratic administration in the US, but also the Europeans can't just put aside. You know that there have been big debates if Biden on his visit should go to Saudi Arabia. Finally, he did. But about the messages, and he had a lot of discussions at home. So I think this is not going to happen very easily. You know, it's Saudi Arabia is not like the other, it's much more important, but there are also a few problems, I think, to overcome before they will be on board. Therefore, it would be interesting for the partners of the Abraham Accords Are there ideas, and what could they do or could we do together to, at least, for example, on the economic level and economic programs, integrate Palestinians in the process so that they not feel, they are pushed aside and nobody, the whole Middle East is not interested anymore in resolvement of this conflict.
Thank you, Kirsten. Well, that brings me to my last question to you, Kirsten, and please try to be as brief as possible because we want to leave enough time also for the audience to ask questions, a few questions from the audience. So my last question to you, since the previous one was to Amos, Kirsten, is the following, which is, and you started touching upon it, but I'd like to elaborate a little bit. The question is that Europe is facing an energy crisis due to the war in the Ukraine, a war that has also contributed to a spike in food prices. Now, Morocco, I'm talking a lot about Morocco because I'm there right now. Morocco happens to be the world's first producer of phosphates, which is a major source of fertilizers, as well as a world leader in solar energy. Israel is a technological powerhouse, and the Gulf states are a financial hub. So my question to you is that, don't you think there is a huge potential here to improve together, and also together with the Palestinians, food, water, and energy security, but also to handle the energy transition?
Yes, I already say so. I'm convinced that this is a major area where they really could cooperate in the future. It's not only for Europe, it's for the whole world, also for the Middle East, a big question. How can energy transition look like? How can we, come away from fossils? How can we reduce CO2 emissions and so forth? And I think you mentioned it already. Morocco is very good in solar energy. Europe has a lot of experience and know-how there. Israel brings a lot of startups, not only digital, but also in this renewable energies, as far as I know from my stay there. There's a startup scene also in the area of renewables. So I think there's music in it, you say in German, Therefore, probably it's possible to think about, cooperation, really projects where money and funds is putting together, and where these kind of projects, energy transition projects, can be financed in the future.
Well, thank you very much indeed to both of